International organizations are created through a constituent document, which is basically a treaty between two or more states. Only states, as the principal subjects of international law, can be members of international organizations. As clarified by the ICJ's 1996 advisory opinion on the use of nuclear weapons about the World Health Organization, international organizations are created by states as subjects of international law endowed with certain autonomy so to perform certain functions accorded by the founding states. As subjects of international law and clarified by the ICJ's 1949 reparations case, international organizations therefore have international legal personality. This means that international organizations have certain rights and obligations under international law. Although international legal personality may not be mentioned in the constitutive instrument or treaty or charter establishing the international organization, international legal personality may be implied from the functions and objectives set upon by the states to the international organization. In short, although an international organization is made up of states, it nonetheless has been endowed with a distinct will to autonomously meet its objectives and functions. An international organization, once established, will eventually take on a life of its own. The status of international organizations, however, are not equal to states. States have more rights and obligations, given that they are the principal subjects of international law. Again, with the ICJ's advisory opinion on the use of nuclear weapons about the World Health Organization, international organizations are governed by the principle of speciality, that the legal personality and thus the rights and obligations of international organizations are limited by its speciality or function conferred by the states which created them. Thus, rights and obligations for international organizations are only to the extent it is needed and necessary. An example of the difference between the personality of states and international organizations would be with regards to the immunities which international organizations enjoy. The immunities of international organizations are not based on sovereignty, which is the case for states. Instead, immunities are only accorded to international organizations and their representatives as are necessary for the fulfillment or effective exercise of their functions. An example would be the Jeffrey Liang or Hue Feng versus People case, where a criminal complaint was filed against Jeffrey Liang, an Asian Development Bank or ADB official, for grave oral defamation. Years later, after Mr. Liang was charged, an appeal was made to the political character of Mr. Liang, as he is a representative of an international organization. However, the court ruled that the appeal of Mr. Liang's immunity from prosecution was not absolute, as this was limited to the official function and capacity of the ADB. It is obvious that slander or oral defamation is not an official duty, and thus the petition was denied. More about immunity soon, and back to international organizations. The principal international organization is the United Nations. It was established by the UN Charter as a universal organization. Number 1, for the maintenance of international peace and security. Number 2, to develop friendly international relations based on respect for the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples. Number 3, to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems and the promotion and encouragement of human rights and fundamental freedoms. And 4, to be the center for harmonizing international action in the attainment of the aforementioned goals. Today, the UN now includes almost all of the world's sovereign states. It is expressly declared in Article 2, Section 7 of the UN Charter that the United Nations cannot intervene in matters which are essentially within the domestic jurisdiction of sovereign states. However, this principle of non-interference shall not prejudice or affect the application of the Chapter 7 powers of the UNSC. Chapter 7 gives the UNSC power to act against any threat to the peace, breach of peace, or act of aggression by any state. Through this, the UNSC may call upon all the members of the UN to collectively act as may be necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. We've already discussed the roles of the UNSC and the UNGA and the relationship with international law previously. Other organs of the UN include the ECOSOC, or the United Nations Economic and Social Council, which coordinates the international community towards economic and social development. Another organ is the Trusteeship Council for the supervision of non-self-governing territories, which we already discussed as well. And another organ is the Secretariat, which comprises the Secretary General of the UN and his or her staff, which may bring attention to the UNSC on any matter which is, in his or her opinion, may threaten the maintenance of international peace and security. And finally, another organ is the ICJ, which we will discuss more on later. The UNGA and the ECOSOC have also set up numerous bodies, commissions, councils, and committees like the International Law Commission, or the ILC, the Human Rights Council, the United Nations Environment Programme, the UN Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, and the Commission on the Status of Women. Outside the 6 principal organs of the UN are the specialized agencies, a callback to the speciality principle, which are deemed necessary to fulfill the goals of the United Nations. Some of these are the International Labour Organization, the International Maritime Organization, the International Civil Aviation Organization, UNESCO, the WHO, and the Food and Agricultural Organization. Beyond the UN, there are also organizations like the ASEAN or other regional organizations. There are also international trade organizations like the WTO, and there are also regional development banks like the ADB and the AIIB, or the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, as well as those organizations which are closely linked to the United Nations, specifically the World Bank and the IMF. For the next lesson, we will discuss international courts and tribunals, which are usually attached to these international organizations. See you in the next lesson.